you figure out what unfamiliar words mean. That helps you infer or figure out things you may not know. Here's an example. Slowly, it dawned on the sisters that no one, not one living soul, had set foot within this ominous castle in hundreds of years. As they brushed aside the cobwebs, climbed the creaky staircases, and entered one dark room after another, the two girls felt like deep-sea explorers. The beam from their flashlight was like the spotlight of a plunging submarine, peering into the ocean's depths, shedding unwelcome light onto the unseen. Maybe they should have turned around after all. Well, I don't know what ominous means, but from that style and tone, I'm feeling a mood of menace, a mood of threat. I feel like something evil is about to happen. They're brushing aside cobwebs. They're climbing creaky staircases. They're entering one dark room after another. Maybe they should have turned around after all. It gives me the chills because there's something creepy about this. From all of those clues in the style and the tone, I can figure out that ominous must be an omen that something evil is about to happen. It must be a feeling of impending dread. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and use context to determine the meanings of the underlined words and phrases. Also, identify the kinds of context clues that helped you infer these meanings. Here's some answers. The teacher shot Brittany one of his famous withering glances. She froze in response and put her cell phone back into her jacket. I don't know what withering means. I can figure out that it must mean devastating or scornful because I've got a cause and effect clue there. If she froze in response and she put her cell phone back in the jacket, the teacher obviously is upset at her for taking out her cell phone or having her cell phone ring. So a withering glance must be disapproving, and so disapproving that she obviously froze and put away the cell phone. So withering is scornful. Withering is something that causes somebody to react in a strong and fearful manner. The chef seared the edges of the tuna steak. That is, he scorched them in a very hot pan. The unfamiliar word there is seared, which is a very specific cooking term. I can use a definition clue. I have the phrase, that is. That's my clue that there's going to be a definition to follow. That is, he scorched them. Well, seared must mean to scorch. And indeed it does. When you sear meat, you cook it on a very, very high heat, and the edges stay together. They sort of cook together and form a base on the meat. Number 3, far from a fortune, the salary they offered Dwayne was downright paltry. Well, paltry is the unfamiliar word here. I have a contrast clue. It's whatever paltry is, it has to be the opposite of a fortune. Well, a fortune is a lot of money. So paltry has to be a little bit of money, and indeed it is. It's a ridiculously small amount of money. Number 4, it seemed innocuous enough, just a harmless, friendly game of touch football at the family picnic. Innocuous means harmless. Well, that's easy. That's a restatement. It seemed innocuous, just a harmless game. Harmless is my restatement clue from innocuous. Number 5, Dr. Figueroa specializes in the evolutionary biology of South American rodents, from the pocket-sized guinea pig to the 140-pound capybara. I have never heard that term capybara. Well, What is it? It has to be some kind of South American rodent. An example of it, because the author has provided me 2 different examples. The first is the pocket-sized guinea pig. The other example is this 140-pound rodent. So I'm using the example clue to figure out what this rodent must be, which I really wouldn't want to meet. Number 6, R. I just couldn't take it anymore. I was incensed. I've got style and tone here. I've got R. I just couldn't take it anymore with my exclamation. That tells me that the writer is very angry and very upset. From the anger and the upset, I can figure out that incensed must be furiously angry. And indeed it is. As you read, use context clues to help you figure out the words that you may not know. You can always go back and check your answers in a dictionary, but the act of trying to figure out the context clues will also make you a better reader. In addition, you can learn word histories. Words, like people, often have interesting pasts. And knowing the history or the origin of a word, its etymology as we call it, can help you remember the word and can help you make it a part of your own writing. How do you find a word history? Well, you can look up the histories on the web, or you can look them up in books, because there are many books about word histories. Once you find the history of a word, or many words, group them together, and that'll make it much easier for you to remember them. For example, we have words from people's names, we have words from ancient Greek and Roman myths, we have words that come from places, from clothing, from colors, from foods. For example, from people's names, we have America, we have sandwich, we have mesmerize. The word sandwich is particularly interesting, that word history. The Earl of Sandwich, that was a place in England, was apparently quite a gamer, and he didn't want to leave the gaming tables long enough to eat dinner. So he asked his butler to take 2 slabs of bread, put some meat in between, and give it to him. The butler did, and that came to be known as the sandwich. We also have words from Greek and Roman myths and legends. Adonis, Herculean. An Adonis is a very handsome man, because Adonis was very handsome. Hercules was tremendously strong. And from Hercules, we formed an adjective, Herculean, which means tremendously strong. We also have words that come from places. For example, tuxedo, denim, bialy. The word denim, for the cloth that's used in clothing, comes from a town in France, de Nîmes, of the town of Nîmes. And so denim, de Nîmes, became known as the cloth. The tuxedo came from a place in Upper New York State, Tuxedo Park, where a gentleman decided to cut the tails off his coat, his very formal coat, and make a short jacket, and that came to be known as the tuxedo. The bialy came from a town where these particular kinds of onion rolls were made. We also invented words from clothing. Bloomers, you may have heard, or Wellingtons. Bloomers came from a woman named Bloomer, who had created these pants for women to wear. At that time, women were not allowed to wear pants. Wellingtons are a type of boot. They're a one-piece rubber boot. They come up to your knees. Also came from the person who invented these boots. They were worn, and the word became part of our language. We have words from colors, chartreuse and indigo. They also have histories. And we have words about food. For example, Cajun and vichyssoise. Vichyssoise is a cold potato and leek soup. I won't spoil your fun. I'll let you look up some of these words as well. When you have a chance, look up Cajun, look up vichyssoise, look up chartreuse, look up indigo, and you'll find they have absolutely fascinating histories. Here's one of my personal favorites. You may have heard the phrase a toady. It's someone who's a toady. Well, in the 1600s, people mistakenly believed that toads were poisonous, and that anybody who ate a toad's leg rather than a frog's leg would die a miserable death. So rather than not eat frogs' legs, because people weren't willing to give up frogs' legs, they tried to find a cure for this so-called fatal poisoning. Quack healers. A quack healer is a fake healer, someone who doesn't have any medical training but pretends to do so. So quack healers would perform in public, and they would sometimes hire an accomplice to eat a toad. The quack healer would then whip out his cure and save his helper's life. The helpers, the people who ate the toads, came to be called toad eaters. Makes perfect sense. Since anyone who would eat anything as disgusting as a toad had to be completely under his master's thumb, toad eaters, or toadies, became the term for any bootlicking, fawning flatterer. So anyone who really overly praises somebody else, today we call a toady. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and use a dictionary or an online resource to find the history of these 8 words. Also, learn their meanings. Then come back. Here are the answers. Mentor comes from mentor, who was Odysseus' friend and his son Telemachus' tutor in the Odyssey. The term now means a trusted teacher or guide. And the reason was that mentor was indeed a trusted teacher and guide to Odysseus and to his son. The word has a very good connotation, which we'll learn about in a few moments, because we associate it with someone we can trust and someone who's very wise. Quisling is rather the opposite. That word has a very bad overtone to it. It comes from Vidkun Quisling, who lived from 1887 to 1945. He was a Norwegian army officer who collaborated with the Nazis. The term, of course, now means a traitor, someone who betrays his country. And to call someone a Quisling is a very bad thing to do, because the term has such a bad use to it, a bad meaning to it. A thespian, you may have heard, is an actor. It comes from the Greek poet, actor Thespis, who lived around 534 BC. And from his name, we took the term thespian. Quixotic is one of my favorite words. I love the sound, I love the use. It comes from a book called Don Quixote, which was published in 1605. In the book, the hero, Don Quixote, is very chivalric and very impractical. He dreams of saving damsels in distress, and he dreams of doing wonderful things. He ends up tilting at windmills. And we use the term quixotic today to mean someone who has lofty but very impractical sentiments, a dreamer. Sideburns, those things that men like to grow, comes from a 19th century U.S. Army general whose name was Ambrose Burnside. We took Burnside, we flipped it into sideburns. And as you would expect, General Burnside had huge, bushy sideburns. Dahlia is a very delicate flower. It's named after Anders Dahl, the Swedish botanist who discovered it in Mexico around the turn of the 19th century. You'll find quite a few words are named after people who discovered them. Pasteurize comes from Louis Pasteur. He was the French scientist who discovered that applying controlled heat could kill most of the microorganisms in certain foods and beverages. And as you probably know, all of our milk is pasteurized, and then some of it is, of course, homogenized. But when we pasteurize it, we cook it a certain amount to remove the harmful germs. Nicotine, it's an addictive drug found in tobacco plants, comes from Jean Nicot,